Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Hope you're having good time with your family and friends and liking these sessions. In today's video, I'm here to talk about Azure Arc Service and which services underneath this are free and paid, and how also you can make use of all the licensing that you might be having in your on-prem environment. While talking to the partner community, there is a lot of confusion around services. So let's try to make it simple with today's session. So let's start with a brief overview of what Azure Arc Service is. So in simple term, it is nothing but a service through which you can bring your servers regardless where they are sitting, and that can be projected as an Azure resource. So as you can see on the screen, I have Azure. I have my on-prem data center and also have a third-party cloud like AWS. Like in any enterprise class customer, you might be having these resources spread across various locations. So you might be having your resources sitting in your on-prem data center. You might be having your resources sitting in AWS. And from the management perspective, it can be really challenging. You have to manage all these different sites in silos. With Azure Arc, you can project this as a Azure resource, and everything can be managed through Azure portal. So let's say I have this on-prem machine. I can deploy something what you call connected machine agent. Sometimes it is also referred to as an Azure Arc agent, but once you go and deploy under the services, it will be as connected machine agent. And once you do that, this will be part of Azure resource, and you can manage it same way you manage any Azure service. That's where Azure Arc is so powerful. You get the single pane of glass management. Now you can obviously add more services on top of that, and we're going to talk about this in a moment. But again, to keep it simple, you deploy that agent onto your machines, regardless of where they're sitting, and that will be part of your Azure Resource Manager. And you can apply management capabilities, security policies like native Azure Resource. And all this connectivity is outbound. So this is a very lightweight agent that's get deployed, and Microsoft is not getting access to any data that you might be having in on these machines. The only thing that you're going to get in Azure, which is being projected, is the name of the machine and some of the other configuration. But your data is not leaving your on-prem data center or data which is sitting in third-party cloud. So let's break this down into two services. So you can get free option, and then there's a paid option too, right? So as part of the free service, you get complete control of the inventory, and I'll show you on the portal, right? You can manage this based on the resource group, subscription, management group, all those capabilities you can apply. You also get, as part of this service, management. Now I'm going to add an asterisk over here. When it comes to managing, let's say, for example, the Windows Server, you can make use of Windows Admin Center, though it is said it is labeled as free. But when I show you on the portal, there is a requirement from the licensing perspective. And then you can also apply best practices, and you can onboard these machines as part of Azure Auto Manage. Now, this service is also labeled as free. I'm also going to add an extract over here uh, uh, because if you're onboarding these machines as part of the auto manage, the service is free. But if case it's utilizing any services underneath like login native workspace or backup and everything, obviously there's going to be a cost associated with that. So this is part of the free service. And then you have paid option, right? So once you bring those machines or project this machine within the Azure cloud, you can do more stuff with that. And some part of the paid services include Azure policy, guest configuration. Now this is charged based on per server, and the cost is $6 per server per month. As you know, Azure policy can be used to keep your environment safe, compliant from the management perspective. So you can utilize those services for free, but when it comes to specifically the guest configuration, now, for example, some of the example I can give you of the guest configuration can be password policy, encryption, maybe the change tracking on the operating system or registry changes. There is a complete list. So if you go and enable Azure policy guest configuration, the cost going to be per server, and it's going to be $6 per server per month. Then you also have the cost of update management. Now, you can use Azure native services. So Azure Update Manager is an Azure native services. And once you onboard the machine through Azure Arc, you can update these machine. You can apply patches. You can do it manually, or you can also schedule it. So all these capabilities are provided to you through update management. And the cost is again based on per server, which is $5 per server per month. So this is part of your paid service. And then from the licensing perspective, you can apply extended security updates. So let's say if you're running maybe server 2012 R2, right, which is end of life, you can purchase extended security updates and enable that through Azure Arc. So that option is also there. And even if you're running, let's say, SQL 2012 or 2014, you can also buy extended security updates through Azure Arc too, right? So that's a great option that you can go and enable these services, and these are all pay as you go model. Then another case scenario is that a lot of customers or service provider, they provide these services through SPLA, which is service provider license agreement, right? Now, if you want, you can also enable SQL licensing and transition from SPLA to this pay as you go model. Now, this does not mean that SPLA is going anywhere. SPLA is going to be there at least till 2029. That's the information that we have. But you might come across a scenario, because one major difference between SPLA and this regular pay as you go licensing enabled through Azure Arc is that with SPLA, you need to have a minimum monthly subscription available, whereas in enablement through Azure Arc, it's going to be per hour. So let's say there's a scenario in which there is a company which want to utilize the service only for, let's say, a couple of days in a month, right? Or maybe a couple of weeks in a month, not entirely for 1 month. So as I mentioned, SPLA, you got to have at least 1 month of billing, whereas in SQL pay as you go enable through Azure Arc, it's going to be per hour. So that's a great case scenario for those kind of customers. Also, in case you want to have, let's say, uh, 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 a schedule busting, in case there is a scenario in which there is a peak season and you want to deploy maybe a SQL Server only for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, in that case scenario, rather than tying up into those monthly or yearly subscription, you can go and enable this for how long you want to use it, and then you quickly remove those resources. and you only pay for per hour. So in certain scenario, I think it makes sense to go and utilize SQL license pay as you go model. But yeah, supply is always there, but this will can be enabled through Azure Arc. So all these things falls under the paid service for you, right? All right. So at least this gives you an understanding of free versus paid. But now there are a couple of more scenarios that might be interesting over here. So remember, I told you that you can go and enable this through deploying a connected machine agent, and that will be projected into Azure as an Azure resource. But let's say if you have on-prem licensing with software assurance, right? You have Windows Server licensing with software assurance, or optionally, you have Windows Server subscription licensing that you're running. Now, in case you have that, a lot of services you get for free. This includes accessing these machines through, let's say remote management, which can be enabled through just in time. You can make use of managing your server through Windows Admin Center. So that is also part of benefit you get in case you have these on-prem licensing with software assurance, right? Uh, Change track monitoring. That is also part of your software assurance. Now, there is going to be some additional cost because in order to enable change track monitoring, you need to have a Loginetic workspace. So that's on top of that. There's going to be separate cost, but these components going to be free for you. Then you also get, let's say, Azure Site Recovery. This service is also free. So as you remember that in case you want to fail over your machine from on-prem into the cloud, ASR is the service from the business continuity perspective. You won't get charged for the licensing fee for the ASR, but other fees like storage, right? Any networking cost, right? Ingress egress charges, there is going to be cost for that, right? But for the ASR configuration, you won't get charged for that. And then there's some more services which I'm going to show you on the portal, right? So with software assurance, you get this benefit. Now, let's say you also have enabled Defender for Cloud, Server Plan 2 for your Azure Arc enabled machine. In case that's the case, you don't need to pay for Azure Policy Guest Configuration. That's part of that. And also, update management is also included for you with Defender for Cloud Server Plan 2, right? So, certain things, right, based on what you have and what you're trying to enable, there's certain services are going to be already part of your existing components that you might be having. But this can be broken, as I mentioned, can be based on the free. But just remember one thing, that the idea behind Azure Arc is to bring your services within Azure and project it as an Azure resource. And then you can apply compliance, security policy, management, all these things that you typically associate with any Azure deployment, regardless of where your machines are sitting. So enough of theory. Let me just show you on the Azure portal where you're going to see some of these components. I have admin access, so I'm Azure. I'm the owner for the subscription. So let's go and search for Azure Arc service. And just for this demonstration, as you can see, once you reach this page, you have the complete control from the left plate. But let me show you, because I have projected one machine. This is sitting in my on-prem data center. You can see the Arc agent status is in connected mode. You get the resource group it is setting, operating system. So let's get and inside this machine. And this is the management I'm talking about. You can keep a track of the inventory regardless of where it is setting. You get what operating system it is running, on what hypervisor. You can see it is running on VMware, right? I can go and apply tags to keep a track of this. So you can see this is in my data center sitting in Toronto, the country, which province it is, which is in Ontario. But you can add more uh, tags to this, right? So that's where it is. And now from the paid perspective, like your paid services and operation, I have the policy. I can go and expand that. I can go and assign policy. And if I can go and show you, let's take example of the guest configuration, because that's where the cost is going to come from, assuming you don't have any license. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So let's say guest configuration. So all these policies going to be part of the guest configuration. So just for the example's sake, if you go and apply these services, then there's going to be a cost which is based on per server. But this is all guest configuration, right? And similarly, let me close this. You can go and apply updates. As I mentioned, you want to schedule the updates, you want to apply patches. That's going to be part of your update management. And again, it is based on per server, which is $5 per server per month. But let's see what happens in case you have on prem licensing with software assurance. So, under license, I'm going to go to Windows Server, Azure Benefits and License. And if I go and select this, you have this button of Activate Benefits. And let's go and expand that. And in case you have those licenses, all these services, whether it's Update Manager, Change Tracking, Machine Configuration, Windows Admin Center, right, Remote Support, Advanced Networking, only 2025 and above, best practices, Azure Site Recovery Configuration, that's going to be all part of your licensing that you have on-prem. And by checking this box, you're telling Microsoft that, yes, okay, I have those. Microsoft can always go and audit that, but you just need to check this box. And all these services going to be part of your Azure Arc. And you don't need to pay separately for that, which you need to do in case you don't have these licensing, right? And that's why I mentioned, like in Windows Admin Center, though it says free under the Azure documentation, but it's tied up with the license for you. So if you have software assurance or maybe Windows Server subscription licensing, you can go and enable these services. Some of these services, as I mentioned, like ASR, the licensing is free, which is based on per server otherwise. But other services which are part of that, like storage, log ingestion, that's going to be paid. And then the compute. So in case you want to failover this machine, the compute will start applying for that specific VM or that compute node. So those going to be separate. But your configuration and those licenses will be part of your because you already have the software assurance, right? So some of these things you got to keep in mind. And I've already explained you, in case you're utilizing, let's say, Defender for Server Plan 2, you don't need to pay for Azure Policy guest configuration as well as the update management. And then other services from the licensing perspective, as I told you, you can go and enable extended security updates. You can go and create. I have detailed videos in the playlist, which I'm going to share in the link with you. You can also enable SQL Server license. One scenario, as I told you, that in case you want to move from SPLA to pay-as-you-go SQL licensing, in certain case scenario, that's going to be good for the customer, because they don't need to purchase for full month or maybe for full year. They can go and enable that for per hour billing and then get rid of once their work is done. So that can be enabled from here too. And you can also apply extended security updates for your SQL Server too. Same way, you can go and create and you can apply. And all these things can be managed and compiled under resource group, management group, under subscription. And this, as I mentioned, this can be applied to different scenarios. It can be for your machines, the way I have onboarded this in my example here. It can be applied to Kubernetes cluster if you're running hosted environment like Azure Local, which is rebranded from Azure Stack HCI services, VMware vCenter. All these services, including data services like SQL Managed Instance, SQL Server, Data Controller, even IoTs, can be onboarded through Azure Arc. So this gives you an idea about what are the different services as part of Azure Arc, and what are the differences between free, paid, and some of the licensing options that you need to keep in mind. Hopefully, this was helpful. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.